Spotlight caches are coming to Marvel Snap very soon in our next patch later this week, and this new system is going to increase the number of Series 4 and 5 cards that everyone in the game gets. How many Series 4 and 5 cards you're going to be getting additional varies based on the size of your collection. The more Series 4 and 5 cards you're missing, the more additional ones Spotlight caches are going to mean for you. But even someone like myself, that's essentially collection complete sans new card releases, is still going to be getting additional variants and cards under this new system compared to what we were working with previously. I was thinking about making an entire video dedicated to optimizing your Spotlight caches, but really looking at the system and thinking about it, there's one single kind of golden rule you need to follow to get the most out of the system, and here it is. To make sure you're getting the most out of your Spotlight caches, it is crucial that you never open a Spotlight cache unless you have enough caches to guarantee the outcome that you are looking for. How the system works is every single week, Spotlight caches start with 4 objects in them for each player. Using this first week as an example, we always have the latest card release, Jean Grey. There are 2 cards that are existing Series 4 and 5 cards that get repeats. In this week's case, Null and Living Tribunal are going to confirm to be those cards. And the fourth slot is a random any Series 4 or 5 card that could also be one that you already own. These existing Series 4 and 5 cards could have that as well. What if you already own Null and Living Tribunal? You're not more likely to get Jean Grey just because you already own these cards. Spotlight caches always start with 4 objects in them. And if you already own the base card for Null and Living Tribunal, they are replaced by these Spotlight variants, which, while unique, are still not additional cards. This means if you run bad opening your Spotlight caches pulling towards Jean Grey, it could take you 4 Spotlight caches to guarantee your Jean Grey, even if you already have the other cards in the box. Sure, you'll get cosmetics with it, but in order to guarantee a card, you need to open 4 caches. Now, a lot of the time, you're going to open the cards you're looking for before you get to the 4th cache, but it's important to note that if you start opening towards that one card that you're missing, you are gambling a bit if you can't have enough caches to guarantee it. There's a theoretical spot in this system where you open a Spotlight cache every single week, only a single one of them, and you have one or more of the cards in these Spotlight caches, and you actually never get a new Series 4 or 5 card. This would be incredibly unlucky, and it would require you to make choices that make the system inoptimal. But it's worth acknowledging that if you're not thinking ahead at least a little bit and using your resources correctly, this new system does have the potential to be worse. It's also worth acknowledging that it has the potential to be a lot better if you go on a good streak and have a couple of weeks in a row or even an entire month where you open that latest card release in just 1 or 2 caches every single time. Second Dinner has confirmed that not only the cards will be coming in the first week's Spotlight caches, but they're going to be giving us the entire season's Spotlight caches at the start of each season moving forward, they've told us. So we know with certainty that with Echo inside of the Spotlight weeks 2, we'll have Iron Lad as well as Kang the Conqueror. Coming in week 3 alongside Legion, we will have High Evolutionary and Darkhawk. And then in the 4th week, since this is a 5-week season, we'll have Mirage being paired with Thanos as well as Master Mold. One dynamic with this new system that'll be interested to see how people feel about it as it plays out is it's not just the new card releasing that determines whether or not it's optimal to open your spotlights in a given week. If your goal is to add the most new Series 4 and 5 cards to your collection that you're currently missing, opening your spotlight caches on weeks where you're missing both of the returning Series 4 and 5 cards makes the most sense and will result in you adding the most new cards to your Marvel Snap collection. Another thing worth considering when thinking about how to use your Spotlight caches and other resources in Marvel Snap is Series 4 and 5 are not going away in any way, shape, or form, and there's still a collector's token price difference between cards inside of those series. For this coming month, Mirage as well as Legion will be releasing directly into Series 4, meaning you could acquire them for just 3,000 collector's tokens, while Echo as well as Jean Grey today are both cards that are releasing directly to Series 5, meaning if you want to pick them up with tokens as opposed to Spotlight caches, they'll cost you 6,000. What is optimal for an individual player to open is going to vary a bit collection to collection, as well as what cards you personally are interested in obtaining to play with. Looking at all 4 weeks of the cards that are coming inside of these Spotlight caches, if I were to examine them generically, I would say that week 2, featuring Echo, Iron Lad, and Kang, is probably the best week to open, assuming you want all of these cards that are being featured equally and you're missing all of them from your collection. I think Echo or potentially Jean are likely the most playable or powerful cards that are releasing inside of July. And as far as reruns go, Echo is being played with Iron Lad and Kang the Conqueror. Iron Lad is a card that sees play in a number of different strategies, and it is a Series 5 card currently, meaning if you were to pick it up outside of a Spotlight cache, it would cost you 6,000 collector's tokens. Kang doesn't really see much play in and of himself, but he is a perpetually Series 5 card, meaning he's never going to be cheaper than 6,000 collector's tokens. So if you wanted a chance to have an excuse to dork around with Kang without spending an incredible amount of a valuable resource on it, this is a week where opening for that could be worthwhile, since you're potentially getting other useful things along the way, such as Iron Lad and Echo. As far as the second best week to potentially be opening your Spotlight caches on, this one has a little asterisk next to it that there are likely high evolutionary changes coming with the patch this week. So depending on how hard they hit this card, this could vary, but High Evolutionary and Darkhawk are both Marvel Snap format staples that are played in powerful and competitive deck lists. I would be shocked if High Evolutionary wasn't still a reasonable choice after they make changes to them. Their team tries to do their best to make cards weaker without making them outright unplayable. The new card in this week 3 Spotlight is actually probably the weakest of the bunch, and honestly, depending on what your goals are for your collection, this could be a week where you're perhaps opening your caches not for the new card, but for a chance to get the older returning cards in High Evo and Darkhawk that are running alongside it. That being said, I do think Legion is going to be a sweet card to do some novel things with, even if it might not be the most powerful card to release inside of July. By a small margin over week 1, I would put week 4 as the third best week to be opening your Spotlight caches in Marvel Snap. Thanos and Master Mold aren't mainstays in any of the top decks in the game right now, but they're both unique effects that have spots that they fit into. Master Mold enables Ronin, and Thanos is honestly just one of the most unique effects in Marvel Snap, extending your deck to that 18 card size with his Infinity Stones. It's also a permanent Series 5 card, so outside of a Spotlight cache week like this, it's going to cost you 6,000 collector's tokens in perpetuity, not getting cheaper anytime sooner. Mirage is only a direct to Series 4 card. It's not a lot of token equity in opening her specifically inside of your Spotlight cache, but I do expect her to be kind of a format Marvel Snap card. She gives you information, drawing the lowest cost card in your opponent's hand, while also adding stats to it. So she's reasonably going to have a decent rate overall in terms of the numbers that she puts onto the board, while also providing key information that should be capable of helping you win games. Finally, I think this first week of Spotlight caches is the least exciting to be opening them for. Null sees play in a handful of decks and is a unique effect. So if you're interested in Null and you don't have it in your collection, I think that could definitely tip opening your Spotlight caches in your favor for this week if you want Jean Grey as well. Living Tribunal, while it's a Series 5 card, it isn't a very good or powerful card, and I kind of expect it to downgrade to Series 4 and eventually Series 3 in a not unreasonable amount of time, since its effect, while novel and unique, just isn't that powerful in the game. I also think something that's interesting to note here is that Jean Grey is what I would expect to be the most playable or powerful new card from all of the releases this month. And I do not think it's a coincidence that the two returning cards in the week where Jean Grey is running in the Spotlight Cache tend to be some of the weaker ones in comparison to the other 6 cards running in the other weeks for Spotlight Caches this month. This use of Spotlight Cache groupings to do things like, say, pair a card like Legion, that's going to be novel and interesting and sweet, with 2 cards that are just powerful and good, High Evolutionary and Darkhawk, is an interesting way on Second Dinner's part to kind of encourage players to open cards that they might not otherwise be willing to spend resources on to try and experiment with new things. If you're a player that wants to just play some of the best decks in Marvel Snap, Legion's Week 3 Spotlight Caches are a premium cache for you to be opening to get access to High Evolutionary and Darkhawk. But if you're a player with that mindset, Legion's probably not a card that you would explore unless you incidentally picked it up for free, which is something that will happen to a lot of people who choose to open Spotlight Caches this week, hunting for these other 2 more powerful cards. All in all, I really like the mix of Series 4 and 5 cards that Second Dinner chose to run with the new releases for this first month's worth of Spotlight Caches. I think the idea of mixing more novel but less competitive previous cards with the more competitive new cards, a la Jean with Null Living Tribunal, while also doing the inverse, mixing previous releases that are really competitive, like High Evolutionary and Darkhawk, with a new card that's more novel in Legion, does a nice job of encouraging players to get a bunch of different cards from a range of competitive power levels to encourage them to work on new ideas and try new toys out, which I think is ultimately what the change to the system is looking to do, on top of just giving players more cards overall. I'll be interested to see in the long run, once we have a couple of months of Spotlight Caches behind us, how they're able to keep this up, comparing their new releases with old ones to make Spotlight Caches appealing week in and week out to players that might be interested in opening for them. Just again, give some closing summary thoughts. The golden rule of Marvel Snap Spotlight Caches is don't think about opening them in a given week unless you have 4 to guarantee getting to whichever specific object in that week you want the most. It is also worth noting that most weeks you're not going to need to open all 4, but just having that guarantee is important, because if you do run poorly in a given week, you don't want to run the risk of not being able to get anything useful out of caches when you start cracking them. As far as power ranking goes for which weeks are going to be the best to open your Spotlight Cache in this first month, it again does depend on which of the repeat cards you already have or are interested in getting. But generically, assuming all things are equal, these are my approximate ratings. I think week 2 is the strongest grouping of cards. Week 3 is the second strongest. Week 4 is the third strongest. And week 1, our initial week, I think is the worst of this initial groupings, generically speaking. With Spotlight Caches being brand new, this type of content that this video is making is new to me and my channel. I would love feedback from those of you that watched all the way through, which bits of this video was useful to you. Are there other pieces of information that I could include to make this content better? I would love feedback on that as well. I'd also love to know your thoughts on Spotlight Caches in general. Are you looking forward to them? Do you dislike the idea of them? Are you in a wait and see mode? As always, if you enjoyed my musings on this topic, snap that like button, help this video reach some more people, and hopefully we'll see you back again real soon for some more Marvel Snap content here on YouTube.